Wally, first of all, welcome to this part of the world, and thank you very much for taking the time out to speak to us on DHBS.
It's a pleasure, actually, because I always try to help out hospital broadcasting services, because they do a very important part. You see, I'm a professional, and there is a very important area where people often don't bother, which is hospital broadcasting. And without guys like you, Rick, there is a lot that wouldn't get done, which is very essential.
Right, so much for us. You've had a long association with country music. I want to touch on something slightly controversial now.
Yeah, sure.
Well, relatively controversial. Your long association with country music. Do you think that we in Britain are approaching the Nashville concept of country music, or shouldn't we?
It's a very difficult question, and I tell you, the answer is, it's what record companies give the people. I mean, if you said old-time music and bluegrass tends to get pushed on small labels. It doesn't get pushed by the commercial companies, and commercial companies are really pushing their image of country music, which, as you say, is not always good country music. For instance, some of the questionable lyrics that are appearing in country music nowadays. If the record companies didn't push it, then these objectionable lyrics wouldn't come out. But I'm afraid it's always in the commercial side of it. It's never in the bluegrass, it's never in old time, or the folk side of things, I find, anyway.
Should Britain try and go its own way as regards country music? You can't. Have an identity of its own?
You can't do it. There's no way you can do it. I mean, in terms of, say, British country music, every single artist except one who is signed to a major label, they're all on tiny little labels who really don't have any backing, they don't have any distribution. And basically, British record companies are not interested in British country music. They're only interested in American country music because the tape's already, and it's a proven success. So really, we're just getting second-hand Nashville all the time.
Yeah. There's a perfect example at the moment, actually. The Frank Jennings Syndicate have got a new single out.
Who's the only one signed to a major record company.
It's been played at least twice on BBC Two, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Is there nothing can be done about this?
Well, the answer there is to see the amount of output. I mean, I work in specialist fields. I work in folk and country music. But there is something like 700 or more titles issued every month. Now, if you sit in the producer's office at the BBC, it comes in, it's like garbage. I mean, people always say, they've bought this record or they treasure this record. At the BBC, I mean, I myself throw out hundreds of albums a year and thousands of singles, and people are always amazed. I give them to local Boy Scouts for, but the actual volume, you can never get through it, and someone like Frank doesn't have a very big name, he won the Variety Club Award, but that's not enough to sustain, so when his single comes out, it's there among the pile of 60 singles to be listened to that week. And unless it's really something very different or something sensational, it's really not going to come through, except in the specialist programmes.
So you think possibly there's no hope really for British country music? It'll always be an also ran?
No, one day we'll get somebody special. We'll get a great personality. I mean, in the sense of Olivia Newton-John, who was singing commercial pop music, went into the sort of vague area of country music, and in fact doesn't mean a thing over here, but in the States, of course, she's enormous. She picks up $10,000 a night.
Yeah.
In this way, that the Americans could say, well, here's an enormous success. Tom Jones records the odd country title, Humperdinck records the odd country title, but not as a country singer. I think it's a very hard identity for a British artist to have, because you're always having to sing halfway across the Atlantic. That's another problem about, how you sing lyrics. So a British country music star, I think one day we'll have one. Somebody will come along with the enormous personality, with the ability to write songs that appeal to people, people like Max Boyce are halfway there.
Yes, true.
If you listen to the songs, you think, okay, they're not singing about barrooms and popper tops, but Max is identifying with working class people, with people from outside of town. So in that sense, it's a kind of British country music identifying with mining, which again is a large amount of American country songs involved with mining.
George Hamilton sings about mining.
So Max is halfway there in that sense, but whether there's somebody there who's going to commit themselves totally, as Frank Jennings does. I mean, Frank won't sing anything but straight country music, Well,
let's hope that one day. Anyway, coming to you yourself, you started a long, long time ago.
It's 20 years ago this year, in fact, yeah.
I let you say that rather than me say it and kind of give your age away. This is way back in the Vipers days.
Yeah, I've been around. I've been so I've been so obvious. I've been around every year doing something or other, so it's not a question where I disappeared for 5 years and took 5 years off my age, you know. I mean, I started off with the Vipers and went from there. I went abroad, living in France for a while, and I was singing in the streets with people like Alex Campbell, busking, and came back and accidentally got into children's television, you know, where I stuck there for 7 years, just doing children's programs and doing folk clubs and other kinds of gigs as well. But my main income was from working on children's television. And this is a funny thing. I'll tell you something about country fans, is that they always hold that against me. They say, you know, how can you do a country music program and yet work for children? I say, well, say I was an undertaker, would that make any difference? You know, they find it kind of hard that I could sing to children and be a country music fan. It's very strange. They've got a very narrow field of vision sometimes, country fans. I mean, they're very loyal.
Yes, they are.
But they can have a terribly narrow viewpoint.
I said they are, I said we are.
But do you agree about that very narrow viewpoint?
Yes, yes.
You see, people say to me, they only like country music. For instance, you know, I was working on a country club and made a decision. I don't think I'm a DJ. You see, I've never been a disc jockey. I've always been basically a singer and a guitar picker. So I worked on country club as a DJ, feeling all the time that I don't think I was any good, actually, but I mean, the BBC employed me and the people seemed to like me, but I was always looking for a way back, and then I was offered Both Sides Now, my Radio 2 programme, which is a mixture of folk and bluegrass and country music. And people thought I was some kind of a traitor, you know. But my field, I mean, I love country music, but there's always something beyond. I mean, I like Latin American music, I like some jazz music, I like blues, there are all kinds of things. I like Elvis Presley, for instance, on certain kinds of songs. But I'm not, per se, that country fan, you know,
no,
who says, you know, if it's not country, I don't like it.
How did you get started with the Vipers?
This was really all my life. There have been a number of coincidences. I started playing guitar just about the time coffee bars opened, you know, and I started singing in a local coffee bar off Euston Road, and the pay was a plate of spaghetti a night. I mean, that's all you got paid. But during the course of it, you know, in those days, guitar players were so rare that as soon as anybody heard of a guitar player, somebody else would come down, you know. And a guy called Tommy Steele, who was a sailor in the Merchant Navy, he came down with his guitar, and we kind of formed a loose group. When he was on shore and on leave, we used to play together, and we played in pubs in the East End. And gradually out of that, it kind of... The group hardened up into the kind of music that we wanted to play. Tommy didn't want to play our kind of music, so he left and went on his own. And then suddenly the skiffle boom hit, and literally within... I mean, it literally was a matter of weeks. We'd been playing together just weeks, and suddenly Soho was full of recording managers, like this punk rock thing going on now, you know. They're running all over the country trying to sign up groups, and that's what they did then. And out of the few that were signed up, the Vipers made it. I think, you know, Chas McDevitt, who was a very good friend of mine, made it, Bob Court and Lonnie, and that was about it, you know. And the boom lasted about, I suppose, 2 years, and it died overnight, literally, you know, because there was nowhere to play. The variety theatres were all closing, coffee bars had changed, and in those days you couldn't play in dance halls because people wanted to dance to music, you know. And the music died, literally, you know.
But in a sense, it was a forerunner of the present beat era.
Oh, it was enormous, because you don't... I mean, it's very hard to find, say, a folk singer around now who wasn't affected by it, who didn't buy a guitar because of it, you know. And everybody got started on guitar, and they sang Lead Belly songs, and they sang Woody Guthrie songs, and then gradually, you know, as skiffle died, they took over, and the folk club movement started.
Yeah.
In the late 50s, and it was the folk club movement that took that over, but it took a long time to organise, of course. But now there are probably 700-800 folk clubs in Britain, you know, an enormous number, employing a lot of professional singers.
That's terrific. Purely by the by, do you remember a skiffle group called Les Hobo? Whatever happened to them?
Well,
or whatever happened to Les?
When I say some of them were my best friends, Les Bennett, who was the leader of the group, was one of my closest friends in those days. He joined Lonnie for several years. The last I heard, he was running a boarding house down in Ramsgate or somewhere like that, but he'd given up the music business. He comes back into it every now and again, and he works with Lonnie for a while, but they were a great group, the Hobos.
Yes, they were.
A knockout group.
I was rather hoping you were going to say that Les had gone to the States and was now a major producer.
Yeah, one of the problems they had was that they were at that particular age. As the skiffle music boom hit, they started to make it, and two of them were called up because it was national service in those days. And two of them were called up, and it rather sort of cut the group in half. And they didn't fulfil a lot of promise, and they're a very good group.
Yes, they were. However, coming up to date now with you, you're both sides now. A truly excellent program, it really is first class. But it's only on radio that we get this business of folk music being played to any extent at all.
Yeah.
Why do the TV companies shun?
I don't know. I can tell you, I mean, a perfect example of this is that it operates in the regions. For instance, I had a show at Tyne Tees, 1969, 1970, 1971. And we had guests like the Spinners and the Ian Campbell Group and people like that. And this went out just in the north of Britain. It went out Scotland, Ulster, and Tyne Tees areas. And we were beating the Tom Jones show in the ratings. Now, the equivalent was that our budget for the whole show, including a bale of hay, was 500 quid. And the Tom Jones budget for the TV show was £150,000. And we were beating them hands down. And I kept pleading to people saying, somebody on the network, take note, And ours was a very simple little show, but this is what people wanted.
Is it something to do with the folk image, that people seem to think that male and female singers are going to come out sounding like Bob Dylan and Joan Baez, and groups are going to sound like the Dubliners?
I don't know what it's all about. I have a feeling that it originates with producers, that producers tend to be kind of showbiz people. They like the glitter. They go for the showbiz end, whereas the folk singing end, the country music end, is kind of a lot of people travelling about the country working very hard. Keeping a very low profile, They don't go out to the nightclubs, they don't wear glitter, but above all, they tend to be very good artists. I mean, I could name you 40 or 50 folk artists I would put against anybody on television and wipe the floor with them. And these are people travelling around, getting no money, earning a very poor living. I know people who live in vans, they live in motor cars. Tremendously talented people, and as I say, I think it's down at the producer end when they say to a producer, well, think up a new idea for a light entertainment show. They tend to say, well, I was at the Talk of the Town last night and I saw Sasha Distel, and I think I could do a very good hour with Sasha, and that's the way I think it works. Is
there any possible way we can overcome it?
The only way you'll overcome it is that those people who work in television outside of London and Granada Television at Manchester, the small-time producers in Scotland, maybe if they make it to the top, then they'll take good groups with them. That's the only hope I feel.
You're dying to light that cigarette.
I'm dying to light the cigarette.
Right. You're currently doing radio, TV, and touring the country and touring the continent as well.
Yeah, I do a lot. Yeah.
Do you vary your act from the continent to the UK?
To be really honest, working on the continent I loathe. I mean, I do it because the money's very good. It's much better than here. But for instance, if you work in Germany, you're treated as a singing jukebox. And it's nothing, to work in a German folk club and have people sitting in the front row reading a book or talking to each other. And it's led me... As you can see, my nose has changed shape several times since I was born. I really do get uptight about things like that, but I'm afraid it's one of the things that you have to put up with. The UK folk clubs people are very nice, they'll sit and listen. It's one of those things. In Britain, they come to listen and have a pint. On the continent, they tend to come and have a few pints and maybe listen. It's completely the opposite point of view,
You sing a lot of traditional songs, and you sing songs I know by Gordon Lightfoot.
Yeah, I'd sing very few traditional songs. The only ones I do, I are children's songs.
They're the ones that I think of as being traditional, actually.
Yeah, but I'm not into folk ballads or very heavy traditional folk ballads. I find I can't identify. Say, I'm a London Irish, and being a Londoner, there's no real identity with folk music. There isn't a London folk scene as there is. If you're a Geordie, there's this enormous fund of Geordie songs. Yeah. If you're from Wales, you've got the same. If you're from Lancashire, there's a great tradition. But London, there's no tradition. So I tend to sing maybe a few Cockney songs. I write quite a lot myself. And sing Gordon Lightfoot, Woody Guthrie, Leadbelly, things like that.
Who are your favourite composers?
That's a hard one, because I like a lot of writers for different things. I like Woody Guthrie for his humanity and his warmth, always caring about people. I like Lightfoot for writing very good melodies. His lyrics, I don't think, are as good as his melodies. I like Paul Simon. He doesn't write very much, but what he does write tends to be real quality, you know. I could really go on.
Yeah.
David Allan Coe. There are one or two modern country writers. Guy Clark, who is writing some superb songs, you know.
How do you think the British folk scene is going to develop over the forthcoming years?
I don't know. Everybody worries about it every year because it's really been going since about '61. And basically it hasn't really changed from about 65. The same artists tend to be working the same clubs.
Yeah.
This is a problem. We've got to find a new generation from somewhere. I honestly don't see it developing because the people who are in charge of them are not commercial people. They're people who organise it for fun. And therefore they're not interested in making money, they're not interested in taking it from the clubs into concerts, for instance, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, the folk club is, for an artist, is the perfect way to work. I mean, you know, to stand within 4 or 5 feet of people and work to them. I mean, it's a great experience. It's you know, if I could afford to do it all the time, I wouldn't do anything else. It really is the ultimate, you know.
Well, what is your favourite medium? Radio, presumably.
No, I'm not very fond of radio. I like television. With radio, you can't smile if anything goes wrong.
True.
With television, when things go wrong, in the old days, of course, used to do a lot of live things, you could really smile and hold things up and sort of say, well, you know, lots of problems there. And you've got camera crews and sound crews, lots of people around. It's a very busy atmosphere, you know, everybody working hard, and you feel a part of it. With radio, it tends to be a producer, engineers, but they're in the box, and it's you and that microphone, and if anything goes wrong, it can be, you know.
Yeah. Don't we know it?
Right, yeah.
Mind you, we don't have to worry quite so much as you do.
It's when you're going to make that goof in front of 2 million people. You know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. You've been to Nashville, haven't you, and seen...
Yeah, I've been
recording.
several times now, yeah.
Is it true that there is a definite feel in Nashville where people just walk into studios and make records without previously having to rehearse and get them together?
Well, to see it done, I mean, it's amazing. And it's an assembly line method of working. But the people on the assembly line are geniuses. I mean, I went in and saw Lloyd Green, as a friend of mine, a steel player, and he invited me down to a midnight session. Saw a guy walk in, and he routined it with a few chords. He said, this is how the song goes. And all the musicians sit down and they write, and then they decide who's going to lead.
Hi, sorry.
These guys, they'll sit down and they just play anything. I mean, to see them is astounding. And you see, they'll knock out a single in 20 minutes. And then they'll go for the second one, 20 minutes, the third one, 20 minutes. And it's a style that I've never seen over here. I've seen a lot of good pickers and a lot of good players, but I've never seen anybody like those guys in Nashville. They are incredible. They play from the age of... They're 4 and they're picking up guitars and fiddles and banjos. And they just play anything and everything.
Oh.
Astounding.
Anyway, Wally, we've had the nod that it's time to go. Thank you very much indeed
Just
for your
before
time.
I go, I forgot one thing. I wanted to say, I hope Ivy Chapman's feeling better and having a good day, Ivy. Are you there? Good.
I'm sure she is. Wally, thank you very much indeed again, and the best of luck tonight.
Rick, thank you very much.
And of course, the best of luck with everything you do.
And I'm on in about 2 minutes.
Yes, you are. Thank you again.